Hot Water History, episode 214, Thursday night. Richard, what's going on?
The government, at the very least, the Canadian government, is proving yet again that in the old Rothbardian formula of the state always being arsonist and firefighter, it's a much better arsonist.
So, right now it's hard to breathe if you go outside in Chicago. I was outside I walked to lunch. It was about 5-10 minute walk. Not fun. Not fun out there. Super smoky, hard to breathe. This is recorded supposedly. I don't know how they really measure this. And we had a fire here, but they say it's the worst air quality Chicago's ever had in history. Air's been
Sounds about
around.
right.
Air's been a thing in Chicago for a while. This is the worst ever.
Even the Native Americans spoke of air.
Yeah. Did you have any experience outside today?
I did. Went and hit range balls. I was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Come on. Let's not be. It's just,
Sucked out there.
it's what?
It was awful out there.
Now, did you actually experience shortness of breath or anything along those lines? Because I didn't experience that.
Maybe lack of depth of breath, but not shortness of breath.
Sure. And there's this clear and noticeable smell of it smells it's reminiscent of mild burning plastic and a campfire
Yeah.
together. Is that an adequate description?
Burnt rubber.
A little bit of that, although it's not as though it's a tire fire. Let's
Yeah.
not go that far.
Right.
But it's just a dark haze on the skyline. It did out in the western suburbs appear to be breaking around midday, and then perhaps because there was a cessation of any kind of breeze, it's just staying over the the area.
So are wildfires a choice in the year 2026?
Well, they're not so much a choice, and we're not going to maybe place direct blame, although I just called the Canadian government an arsonist, but or I referred to them as such, but in their negligence, because as the abundant scholarship has now shown over the course of certainly the 20th and then now the 21st centuries, humankind has grown very adaptive and capable of, at the very least, we're not so good at predicting precisely when natural disasters will take place, whether they be earthquakes or hurricanes and the like. We can anticipate them to a degree and within a specified time frame, given meteorology or seismology or even geology. And yet, what we have been or become very good at is adapting our life in such a way so as to mitigate many of the harms that are caused by natural disasters to the tune that most studies since 1920 have shown that anywhere from 96 to 99% of fatalities resultant from natural disasters are now avoided because of planning, environmental, and other steps that are taken, including how land is developed, primarily through private ownership and care of land and natural resources, so as to ensure that fatalities are drawn down to a minimum.
Do you want me to pull up some of these graphics you sent?
Sure. And then in a most prescient way, the one of the editors, in fact, one of the newest editors and contributors to the Misesian, that is the official periodical of the Mises Institute, Connor O'Keefe, in the May-June edition of the Misesian, wrote a piece, and it's rather lengthy, entitled How the State Makes Wildfires Bigger and Deadlier. How about that? How the state makes wildfires bigger and deadlier. This is not some purely biased account because, in point of fact, Connor O'Keefe started as an undergrad with this somewhat, he describes, insatiable curiosity about natural disasters from that he picked up going back to his childhood and reading books about natural disasters as he grew up in California. As he went off to undergrad school in Worcester, Ohio, or Worcester, Ohio, I can't remember, one of the smaller towns in Ohio. He went to a very left-leaning and progressive small liberal arts college. They're all over Ohio. It's like a pandemic in Ohio. So from Kenyon to Oberlin, whatever. So I forget which one is there, but he went there and his undergraduate and then even post undergraduate research went into studying major floods that had taken place in the region and how careful planning and mitigation had resolved many of the adverse human impacts, direct human impacts. So this led him to write this thing about his own native state, and that was how California dealt with the Pacific Palisades fire and many of the governmental failures that led to that. But it wasn't this piece is not necessarily about the obvious failures, like not having water in the fire hydrants or having incompetent fire chiefs who are clearly DEI hires and thus unable to fulfill their basic duties as firefighters and the like, or first responders, the favorite phrase, first responders, as if these people are the superheroes of the era, like the Flash or a Green Lantern or something. Uh,
I hate the
they're not.
first responders propaganda.
Right, me too. Yeah.
That's the
Um,
worst one.
well, because it's such a stupid understatement that's meant to sound grandiose. First responder. Well, what does that mean? Of course, what you should be the first responder if your entire career is built on stopping or preventing some disastrous event from taking place, whether you're a policeman, a firefighter, or the local dog catcher. Think about how stupid it would be to call a dog catcher the first responder when there's a loose dog. Well, who else is going to first respond? Yes. And by the way, it's sort of a lie. They're not the
I
first
was
responder.
gonna say that. It's not true.
It's not true. It's a
They're the
patent falsehood. But they hold themselves up as being such, even though you would say that there's an almost logical duty for them to be the first official. What they mean is the first official responders. But in reality, they're not the official. They're not the real first responder to some problem that's taking place or transpiring. Yeah. So the map that Charlie's showing to those who are watching the video, but let's explain for those who are just on
Wait,
audio.
sorry, I cut you off. You were
Oh,
talking about how he doesn't bring up the obvious
oh
failures of
yes,
the
forgive
state.
me.
What are some non-obvious failures?
Yeah, you didn't even cut me off. I sort of cut my own train of thought off. And that is the obvious failures are patent because they're obvious. But those that are less obvious are the ones that are actually more have a greater impact. So I almost said impactful. I hate that word. That wasn't by the way, impactful wasn't a word in the English language in 2010. And people just started using it all of a sudden, so they just dropped it into the vocab and the
Is that
semantic or
true?
the diction
That's
of
true.
English. True. Yeah, I remember even in my teaching career, I used to have a correction. You might recall whenever you had a writing assignment, I would give you the things you want to avoid, pitfalls that you want to avoid, grammatic,
Cliches.
stylistic, yes. And then we would go over them. One of those was impactful is not a word in English. And then I had to delete that because it was ultimately entered in
But
as a
impact was.
impact, yes, but not impactful. You see,
Got it.
which in a way makes sense because if you're by the etymology impacting something, it's redundant to say that it's full,
Correct. You're
right?
right. Yeah.
So it's akin to the sentence, my wisdom tooth is impacted, my gum is full of it. Well,
Right.
no shit that you've already said that. It's yeah. Okay, so let's see. The less obvious things. Well, when you have a system by which vast tracts of land, territory, and wilderness, in the case of Canada, that's forests in large part, as well as tundra and the like in the upper reaches and Arctic areas of Canada. When you have government essentially ownership of it. Now, we want to use that term. I'm using that term loosely here. I'm not using that in the Rothbardian sense of private homesteading and, in a sense, husbandry, care of the land and the resources, the way that a private farmer or rancher would take care of such property. You see, In fact, Connor makes this distinction in the piece. He says, he and a fellow writer came up with a new term to describe what it means when the government, in a sense, claims ownership of land, but indeed does nothing to manage it. So I'll try to find that in the piece. As I said, it's a rather lengthy piece, but I know it's quoted here. But maybe I'll come to it when shoot, because it's a neat turn of phrase. So it's essentially what he calls inert guardianship. So it's one thing to just claim ownership, but not mix labor or management of the resource, in this case, land, with your labor. That's homesteading in the Rothbardian sense. Yeah. And that's what makes something property. So you can't just say, I claim Antarctica, you see, and thus that's your property just because you've made even a legal claim to it. In a moral and ethical sense, you are not the real owner of it because you're not deploying your energy, time, labor, and own resources, what we might call capital, to the development of that. And so your claim is null and void. You see, you don't have a legitimate claim to it. So what's interesting though is the way in which we as a general population, especially Western nations and society, simply acquiesce to the state's radical claims to land and sovereignty when that institution that is the state does nothing to foster or develop or otherwise advance, especially for the benefit of humans, but doesn't even do anything to bring about or create anything out of it. Even if it was just simply to, in the case of wanting it to be a polar bear reserve, the state can make wild claims that, oh, we're setting these lands aside for the polar bear, but it doesn't really do anything to ensure
Yeah,
the polar bear is allowed to flourish in those lands. You
right.
see? And as you look at this map, it's what's the most dominant color on the map. So what the map details, again, I'm being more descriptive. Excuse the tedium for those who are watching on video, but Canada's huge, as you can see, second largest landmass by nation or country in the world, next to Russia. And there are several colors that are used to designate the various lands and territories within Canada. The first is purple, it's treaty settlement, that's with the First Nations. There's Indian reserves, that's in red. There's federal reserves, which include military bases and training areas. That's in orange. That's mostly in the maritime provinces, although you can see some in British Columbia in the west. There's private lands. There's other, which means that designation is forest lands and areas that do not fit any of the other categories. So we'll talk about what the government actually does. It claims in the other that there are fire suppression efforts that take place within the other or green area. It's more of an olive green. Then there's restricted areas, and those are managed, large areas, in point of fact, in the blue. They're managed by a wide variety of special purposes, ranging from wildlife values in some to mining in others, protected areas, short-term tenure and long-term tenure in light and dark green. That's where the government allows for mining or forestry by permit or by license. Now, all that being the case, there's one color, it's not really even a color, that's left out there, Charlie, and that's the one that makes up the vast expanse of the map, right? Whether it's in the south of the western provinces or in the north of Canada. And what color is that? And it's, by the way, the colors spread and dispersed throughout the even.
Light gray.
It's light gray. And the light gray designates what? Non-forested land, right? Non-forested land. So that doesn't mean that there's not forests on the land. It just means that they're not being used for forestry. That is all federal land. By the way, you might be surprised to note I wasn't. I was a little bit surprised by the level. I knew it would be a super majority by percentage or a preponderance. What percentage of Canadian territory is owned by either the provinces, or the federal government or the national government in Ottawa? What do you think?
In Ottawa?
No, no, no. In Ottawa, Ottawa is the capital.
Yeah, right.
So that's the national government of Canada.
Oh, got it.
Along with the provinces, which claim territory for state sole usage or licensing. What percentage of Canadian land is owned by the state, by the provincial and national government?
What was the crazy stat we had in the book about Alaska? Wasn't it 40?
Well, Alaska's I think much higher actually, because of the wildlife refuges, areas and stuff like that. Um, but one of the things we had in the book was the immense amount of state territory that was absorbed by the federal government, dating back to the settlement of the West, because it was doled out by the federal government to railroads. I mean, to the point where at one point, 79% of Montana was doled out to the federal government and railroads. That's a large state too, by the way. So go ahead, take a guess on the Canadian issue.
25%.
89.
89% of the land in Canada.
Correct. So
All
11%,
land. 89% of all land in
correct.
Canada.
11% is privately owned. That includes individuals,
What?
yes, individuals and businesses, corporations, other non-governmental, i.e., not even, well, that doesn't even, private issue. That doesn't mean that you're not working as a contracting firm for the government. So, in a way, it's probably higher in real terms. But in terms of non-governmental land, it's 11% of the territory is privately owned, which, by the way, rivals a much smaller state on the world stage in the Middle East with the Star of Ramfan as its flag. That's Israel. 14% of Israel is privately owned. The rest is owned by the
Wow.
Israeli state. Yes. So, of course, here we could almost hear chime in the critics, both Catholic and not Catholic, who decry. It could be even someone like Jimmy Dore decrying rampant capitalism. It's rampant capitalism that's causing all these problems. Okay, that's really tough when you have an economic system that at its core is based upon the a priori right of private ownership, and those private individuals only comprise, in the case of Canada, 11% of the land ownership. So tough. That's a tough go. It's tough sledding there, in my mind.
I can't believe that stat.
Yeah, those are the stats. So there you are. And you could tell by the map. I mean, when you look at now, you could argue too that
I couldn't tell from the map.
you
I said
couldn't.
25. I said
But look
25%.
at, but I know, but look at all the designations of the different colors that dominate the map. It's only orange where
Yeah.
you have private ownership, and that is by far a very small minority of
Yeah,
the
I guess it's all
territory.
just non-orange. I guess it's all just
Otherwise,
non-orange.
otherwise it's just all other like, well, okay, Indian lands, which is very tiny, and then otherwise it's federal reserves, other restricted areas, protected areas, long-term tenure, short-term tenure, and then the gray, which is just simply untouched but claimed sovereign territory of the Canadian government in Ottawa. So there you go.
Yeah, what's the southern area on the border that's
It's
light
just,
gray?
yeah, well, that's just non-forested land. It's just essentially untouched, pristine, not leased out, not used for mining, nothing. Vast wilderness.
Wow.
Yes. And if you've ever had the opportunity to fly over Canada, I haven't had the opportunity to fly over the western provinces of Canada, but I've flown over Ontario and Quebec. And let me tell you, there's nothing there, right? I mean, uh, it's so much so that it's something like 85% of Canadians live within 100 miles of the US border. So we're really talking about a very sparsely populated country. Very sparsely populated. It's not dense at all. It's dense in the cities where you have the population within that 100-mile border, if you will, or extension from the US border. But otherwise, it's just empty.
Do you want to look at this?
So what I thought we'd do is compare, well, let's see where the forest fires are, you see? And what's interesting to note there is that as of July 17th, I don't know, I pulled this on July 16th, so I don't know what is the Canadian, basically the Canadian government is being, they're out ahead of this. They're not ahead of getting forest fires stopped because this is a recurring thing. It was 2 years ago where we had this problem, remember? And then last year, New York and the East Coast dealt with this, all these Canadian forest fires. And if you look at this map, what you see is, yes, there are colors used again. They have red, and the size of the circle designates the location. The larger the circle, the more it refers to, for example, over 1,000 hectares of fire size. And there are a lot of 1,000+ hectares of fires going on in Canada. There are some that are, in quote, being held, that's designated by the yellow. There are several others that are under control. Those are blue, and they're mostly in British Columbia. Then there are the out of control and monitored, which is kind of funny to me. They're out of control, but we have good understanding of where they are. And then and they're spread. And then there's just the out of control, which make up the, would you call it, the second or the highest concentration or number of
Yep.
dots on this on the map? Yes. And it strikes me that having looked at maps of the ashen atmosphere that this has created and how it's gone down into the upper Midwest, even into our own fair Chicago, it's really resultant of those forest fires in Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and then Western Ontario, Western and Southwestern Ontario. You could see that long string there in Southwestern Ontario. And those are the ones that are contributing to the poor air quality and the ash and haze that we're breathing in now. So one might say, I'm just, let's try to steel man the opposite side. Okay, one could argue one Canada is gigantic. So how are the Canadians supposed to be stopping this? The other argument that could be said is, well, okay, how do you ensure you're essentially what I'm certainly arguing, and I think you're of the mindset in arguing, is that private ownership and homesteading of these lands and resources would halt or severely reduce the probability of such destructive wildfires and natural disasters taking place.
Right.
Okay, so let's try to address, in a sense, both of those claims. You see, the first of which is Canada's immense, it's vast, it's sparsely populated, but interestingly enough, not sparsely populated in the areas where the fires are going on necessarily, right? In a weird phenomenon, if you look at the areas where the purple dots are, that are fires that are out of control but monitored, and the areas that there are fires that are under control, they actually are in the least populated areas. So you see the purple and the blue, Charlie?
Yeah.
Those are, I mean, we're talking about Northwest Territories, Yukon Territory, northern Alberta, northern Manitoba. You see? And a little bit of northern Saskatchewan. Okay. The raging fires are in the, actually tend to be a little bit south and are along a belt where, for example, Edmonton and Calgary are located in Alberta. You got Winnipeg up in Manitoba, and then and Regina in Saskatchewan, and then down toward southwestern Ontario, right? Not that southwestern Ontario is massively populated, but it's still more populated than other areas of Canada. All right. So here's the thing. And this is where Connor O'Keefe makes this great point. Again, he was focused on the wildfires in California and government mismanagement there or lack of prevention and planning that allowed for such a catastrophe to take place. Now we can just shift that over, and it is analogous. It does apply to these now raging fires in Canada. So the first thing he says is that the notion of, and he has this nice little thing in California, you have these signs that says entering public lands, and it's all dried out and ready for a forest fire to spread. Okay. So he goes on to say that, look, not only has planning and other steps been taken, including, for example, by private individuals and even, yes, some, I suppose, informed and enlightened public interests. When, for example, there was a disastrous flood in 1969 in rural Ohio. This was an area that was a floodplain. It used to be densely populated. Now, what has been done? Well, they've with those homes destroyed, they didn't just go back and rebuild homes and make that area densely populated. They
Yeah.
put industrial parks or other things that would not lead to the loss of human life in those areas. Or they would build dams and other measures, levees to ensure that the whatever it was, the Ohio River at the time, and still to this day, doesn't cause such widespread flooding. Okay. Uh, but when you have purely government, especially national claims, such mitigating efforts never transpire because there aren't incentives to do so. There's no loss, as is the case here, wherein I I would argue, and it's certainly logical, that given that there are costs, and one could argue that especially for people who are have respiratory illnesses, that this is air pollution and could adversely affect their health. It's affected productivity. There's cancellation of events in the United States and in the communities affected by the mismanagement of these lands by Canada. Now, you could say, well, wait a second. Isn't this akin to, I mean, like, for example, you're a farmer, you have a large bit of land, and for some ungodly reason, there's an infestation of locusts. It's not really your fault. You didn't bring the locusts in, you didn't create conditions to have locusts, and the locust spreads to your neighbor. Well, should you be sued or should you pay restitution to your neighbor? The neighbor has felt harm because of the presence of locusts that originated on your farm. You see? Well, according to Connor O'Keefe and Murray Rothbard, yes, even though it was accidental, it was not intentional. Let me read from this. This is a great piece, and it really stems from a really wonderful magnum opus of Rothbard explaining and expounding upon property rights and homesteading in the context of air pollution. So here's what he said. Or here's what Connor O'Keefe writes. He says, Rothbard wrote an excellent essay called Law, Property Rights, and Air Pollution, where he digs into how a stateless private legal system would handle something like air pollution, or in my example, the locusts. His argument, grounded in common law and libertarian theory, is that any invasion of property that interferes with the owner's exclusive possession, use, or enjoyment of it is unjust, and there's a crime that would justify forcibly collecting restitution. Rothbard didn't write specifically about fires in that particular paper, but the framework carries over pretty well. If you own some land and you let it fill up with fuel that ignites into a massive inferno that destroys your neighbor's farm and a few nearby businesses, that is your fault. And if it happens in the middle of the night or very quickly and people get hurt or killed, that is also your fault. Obviously, if that's the case, it is very much in your interest to make sure that that risk of that happening is as low as you can get it. Now, another component of Rothbard's argument is that it is a bit more controversial, and this is where we get into the accidental rather than negligent part. But it's one that I'm convinced by, that is Connor O'Keefe, and I would join in that chorus, is that property owners are strictly liable. Meaning that if your property is destroyed in a fire that started and grew on your neighbor's land, and this is proven beyond a reasonable doubt, your neighbor is liable even if they manage their land well. And the reason the fire started and spread was not their fault, such as lightning striking a dead tree during a once-in-a-generation windstorm. That may seem unfair, but as Rothbard points out, you also have to look at it from the perspective of the victim whose property was destroyed. Once again, there is an inherent, inescapable risk of that happening, especially in a place like California, or in a very hot and dry season in Canada. I added the hot and dry season in Canada. But because there is a risk that you, as a property owner, could do everything right and still accidentally contribute to either the outbreak or fueling of a fire that threatens the person or property of others, there would probably be demand for insurance against such an occurrence for someone to help cover the restitution in the event of an accident. See how all this is working?
Yeah.
And when the insurance gets involved, the incentives line up even better. Because now investing in land management on your property is not about avoiding some vague hypothetical restitution bill that may never come due. It's a way to lower premiums. Ah, you see, you're incentivized to take all of the necessary steps to do whatever you can to avoid some disaster that might spread to your neighbor's property, not just your own, but your neighbor's property, and thus destroy or ruin the enjoyment or the productivity that might emerge from that property. This is no different than Adam Smith's the baker, the candlestick maker. What is the glazier? What do they care for you? Correct. But you're incentivized to make the best candles. You're incentivized to bake the best bread and do the best glass anyway, even though you have no knowledge of the individual who's buying it, because obviously the market will reward you for making a product that's inexpensive and yet of great quality. You are for through the profit loss mechanism, it's advantageous to you. Same thing here. It become advantageous to you to lower your premiums on insurance by taking care and meeting these, what the insurance companies might call preventative measures to guarantee, or if not guarantee, then to do your best to obviate any potential risk. Okay. Or lessen any potential risk. You now basically have an entire industry focused on monitoring and trading risk related to wildfires, a market that would put financial pressure on those who are not managing their land well. So if you had some yokel who refused to get insurance or refused to manage the property well with insurance, you'd be paying enormous premiums. That's a disincentive, and thus the risk would be mitigated because he'd be essentially not coerced, but in a market way, forced or compelled to lessen his premiums. Yes? And what that does, therefore, is create a web of careful ownership. It's almost poetic. I'm reminded of Robert Frost, Mending Wall. Good fences make good neighbors. Good care of property makes the property value. This is basic real estate too. Yes. One of the compelling reasons, and it is organic, it is natural for why homeowners take care of their lawns or make their homes presentable in the exterior, is to, yes, beautify their own property, but also there is a concurrent communal motivation to do so because property rights go up in your area, in the location, when homes are well cared for.
Right.
See? So we are social beings. This is a method of, as Mises would put it, social cooperation. What's the problem with government ownership? The government doesn't take out an insurance policy. It doesn't have to. There are no there is no operative profit loss mechanism. Even worse, there's no redemption court by which, for example, I mean, one could argue you could go to The Hague. Good luck. The United States, like the Trump administration, could do this. They're just, for a guy who has never read a serious book and would find Dr. Seuss complicated. Donald Trump was, and no one in his dull-witted administration and dullard administration is going to lead a suit of Canada seeking restitution here. And maybe it's a little bit practical because what is that going to amount to? Nothing. It's just going to be a total exercise in futility. But if you had a means by which to seek restitution, obviously you can make a compelling case, and thus Canada would be incentivized to care for these lands, even allow for and the easiest way to do so is just allow for private ownership of them. But when you have this incapable institution in Ottawa trying to tackle the impossibility of management of all of Canada, these are the resultant disasters, or this is the resultant disaster. There are no what I would otherwise call microcosmic economies by which you could have both competition but also communal cooperation to ensure subsidiarity and local management to stop these conflagrations from being real conflagrations.
Microcosmic economies. I like the
Yes,
term.
yes. And this is very much in keeping with Catholic subsidiarity. Everything I've said so far, Leo the 13th would be nodding. I hope he is in heaven, is nodding along because it's through the proper microcosmic management in units such as the family or smaller social communities, in guilds and other cooperative fraternal organizations. Outside of the purview, especially effective is when they're outside the purview of government, local, state, municipal, certainly national, that they function for benefit by engaging in mutual cooperation. And the local knowledge that is operative is something that is totally lost on some bureaucrat in Brussels or Moscow or Berlin and certainly Ottawa and Washington, D.C. That is to say, think too, I mean, if you allowed for greater private property acquisition or privatization of these lands, all of the both insurance incentive structure and then the profit out of those lands would ensure, or profitability of those lands would ensure their care and maintenance. This is why you have um, Jesus Huerta de Soto did a great thing about. He did this. He's a libertarian Austrian thinker from Spain, Argentina. I think it's Spain. But he did this whole thing. I saw him interviewed by John Stossel years and years ago. He said, "What's brought back the bison? Yes, even that bison that tossed that guy way up in the air. In
Oh, that was crazy.
that was wild. Uh, what's brought back the American eagle or some of these endangered species, but especially something like the bison?" And he says it's not any federal or state laws that prohibit hunting them or state and official or civil protections. It's that buffalo are tasty. Yeah. And it's really because all of a sudden it was granted ownership of buffalo herds. And thus you had ranchers that were carefully guarding and protecting the buffalo herds because they had an incentive and profit loss structure uh, to do so. You see, and thus the American bison has flourished ever since. Yeah, and it's not a coincidence that the most abundant animals on Earth are the ones that are most useful to humans. Now you could lament that.
That's amazing.
Well, you could lament that. You could say, "Oh, well, the chicken's ugly, and just because a lot of people like it, do we have more chickens than humans or whatever in certain areas." But at the same time, would you rather have no chickens as well as no emus? I mean, or no orangutans? Yeah. The key is to ensure a species survival, one which has a similar, if not identical, habitat as human beings, is to ensure that one, they be cared for by private individuals who can then be driven by incentive to create some sort of profit from either their protection or their usage. So, the greatest way to ensure a sheep population goes up, make sure there's demand for wool, or allow the market to demand wool. And then we get into, well, what about these animals that aren't necessarily useful, right? So what about the gray wolf? Is it really useful? Actually, they do. There is a use because the gray wolf culls elk herds or something like that and makes sure that they're So there is a natural use. And this is in keeping, I'm sounding more and more like Leo the 13th, and I love it. Uh, Naturally, there's a use, animals have all these usages for humans, you see? So you're not going to, aside from the mosquito, I'll say the mosquito is the difference maker. But I'm sure some biologists would say no, there's a use for humans for the mosquito. But aside from mosquito, which is the most lethal animal on Earth, right, to humans, I think also to other wildlife. But in any case, that might be the lone exception. But everything else has a natural inclination. That's why the notion in Genesis that God made this world and that we are to dominate it as it's he bestowed it upon us for our benefit and that we might manage it, that we might dominate it, make not just a home there, but to again, um, I don't want to say shepherd it. I'm looking for a word, the correctly manage it. I don't know what else. Live and direct it to its proper good function for us. That's not antithetical, and that's not necessarily in conflict. In fact, there's a synergy there between how we can use it and um, properly manage it as opposed to
Steward,
exploit.
foster,
Steward, foster, that's a good word.
cultivate.
Develop,
Yeah.
direct.
That's interesting. The animal thought, because my first thought was bugs after the obvious chickens,
Hmm.
fish.
Hmm.
So maybe mosquitoes are the one exception, and I'm trying to think of others.
I mean, you might say, well, what about more things, even apex predators? I mean, a shark or something like that. There's obviously a use there. But I would argue again with sharks that that usage runs out and naturally is limited by the danger they pose. So I'm all in favor of shark nets because if you have great whites swimming around a beach and they're killing people, we don't just say, well, we're in their habitat. No, no, no. No, no, that's anti-human bullshit. That's anti-human bullshit. And it stems from a worship of apex predators that comes from atheists. Because when you don't have a god, you worship power, and an apex predator is at the top of the food chain, and that's where you have this inordinate respect to love, even worship of species that exhibit such force.
Right.
And that's, by the way, and I'm not just getting this from the Sopranos. For those of you who watched the great TV series on HBO, The Sopranos in the 2000s, but uh, sociopaths really have this inordinate love and respect for apex predators because they're anti-human, they're sociopaths.
I didn't know that was a tell.
Mm. Yeah, serial killers murder or kill small animals. This is almost universal. They found in their childhood, they mutilate, harm small animals, and sociopaths have inordinate. They tend to lament the death of any animal, especially apex predators, but they care very little about the death of a human individual. They're apathetic.
Did you want to talk mediocrity? Did you have any closing thoughts on
Yeah, sure. That
the forests and the fires and not being able to
hmm
breathe and
Yes,
what we
yes.
should take away from all of this?
Yes, and if I could supply something of a transition, when we're talking about Rothbardian theory of property, even as it applies to something like air pollution, of which we're addressing here, people need to have confidence and courage to engage their imagination so as to come up with, yes, sound solutions and change an alteration of their worldview so as to advance human life in prosperity, in morality, in happiness. Now I've gone from sounding like Leo the 13th to sounding like Aristotle, but I'm comfortable with that too. So who's our Canadian scholar who I threw you a connection?
Yeah,
Ed-
so I forgot his name already, but I love this quote. Alain Denault, pardon my
Very good. Good
French,
try.
is
Alain
but
Deneau.
what is it?
Alain Deneau.
Alain Denault.
Good.
In his book La Médiocratie, Médiocratie,
Kati.
Mediocrity,
Yeah.
the system of mediocrity, the Canadian philosopher Alain Deneau writes, quote, mediocrity has won the battle of our time. The era of truth and values has shifted. Mediocrity has seized everything with its mediocrity and corruption. When high values and principles fade away, a programmed corruption of tastes, morals, and values rises to the surface. This is the age of decadence.
Hmm.
The deeper a person sinks into vulgarity, superficiality, and debasement, the more popularity and notoriety they gain. He adds,
What government operative at the present moment could not be better or could be better described than an entity that has sunk its population into vulgarity, superficiality, debasement. And the more that it claims popularity or enjoys popularity and notoriety, the more it indulges the vulgarity, the superficiality, and the debasement.
you're talking about right here.
Yeah. He
Social net,
adds,
what's that?
sorry, he adds,
Social networks have largely contributed to promoting mediocrity. They allow an attractive person lacking depth or a charming but empty individual to impose themselves on the public through various media platforms, many of which are superficial and unproductive, incapable of offering content, bearing values capable of withstanding the test of time.
yeah, not here on the Hot
Not
Water History
here, not here
podcast.
at
Not
all.
here,
That's
baby.
that's why we got no people. That's why we don't ask about the numbers. Hey, you're listening to this right now. Don't
Yes.
ask about the numbers.
Yeah.
And
You're
I'm
the
so
remnant.
comfortable with the numbers, by the way. I'm
Yes.
comfortable with the numbers, just don't ask about them.
Correct. You're the remnant. If you're listening to this, you're the remnant. You're not the mediocre. And we're not trying to just fluff up an audience. That's not the point. It's that you're actually willing to engage in things that are outside the spheres of vulgarity, superficiality, debasement into something more profound. And again, a major theme within the most recent episodes and Charlie and my conversations is the almost total symbiotic relationship that exists between an exercise of courage and a willingness to engage your imagination. Because if you really truly wish to deploy your imagination into new realms, new ideas, subject matters, thoughts, theories, no matter how at first radical or off-putting they might be, as long as they're not degrading, because you can dismiss the unnatural and degrading. But to the point that they're challenging, then you have to have the courage, if you deploy that imagination, to once plumbing the depths of what anarcho-capitalism might mean or name your theory, then understanding it, you might have your worldview change. You might have your let's use the point of if you were just to investigate out of imagination Eucharistic miracles. People, I don't think people we're not lacking conversions by people who investigate, truly investigate Eucharistic miracles, because upon investigation, just like the miracle at Fatima, for example, one rightly concludes that there is a God, that the Virgin Mary spoke to these peasant girls, or peasant kids, sorry, Marto, and um, and that the Eucharist has, through its miraculous, the miraculous occurrences related to it, has our Lord and God, the incarnate Word, Jesus Christ of Nazareth, has shown himself in his full divinity and humanity in the Eucharistic miracles. And that's just through that investigation. We're not lacking conversions from the people who investigate. We're lacking investigators. or those willing to take a look, those willing to be tested and challenged. Do I think that's a is that a major problem in one generation? I I would go so far as to argue that the boomer generation, I don't care if you call me sexist or racist or sexist,
Wow.
race, all those things. I
Just
mean,
go down the line.
ageist, all of them. I don't care. Anti-Semitic. Let's throw that one in there. But the least curious generation, maybe in human history, has been the boomer generation, and being the least curious. Even though it's funny because they all tout themselves as being, oh, I'm so willing to get out there, man. And we're from the hippie generation. You were willing to experiment with mind manipulation. You weren't willing to experiment with mind extension.
Damn. That's a bar.
That was a narrowing. You in taking psychedelics, that's not an expansion of the mind, it's a narrowing of the mind. You were escaping from reality, whereas because you're afraid of what your imagination fully deployed might move you to conclude through the proper functioning of your intellect. And I see it all the time. I mean, people I dearly love. I mean, again, I got into an argument with a dearly beloved boomer about why I'm flying the Iranian flag outside of my house, right? I got another one. Well, I wish you would take that down. Why? Because it's not American. It would be better to put up the American flag. I'm sorry. I'm not. Oh, what is it that you want me to say about what is it that Iran has done to you and the people of Iran that has warranted you supporting or at least turning a blind eye to the government you pay taxes to killing innocent Iranians? Nothing. What's the main export of Iran? What region of the world is it in? What continent is it on? What's the capital? What do they speak in Iran? What nations border Iran? What system of government does it use? What is the majority? What are the minority ethnic groups that exist there? What's the level of religious tolerance and freedom under this supposedly theocratic mullah government? They don't have any clue. They don't have any clue. What happened in 1953 to their democratically elected president? Hmm? Why was there a Roosevelt grandchild running around, toppling governments in the Middle East? Who did he work for? None of these things. Again, they're so, God love them, but they're just morbidly uncurious.
Anything else on mediocrity?
Well, I think we're going to talk about a suburb that
Let's talk about a town that's drowning
drowning in
in
mediocrity.
mediocrity.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
Should go to your gay suburb now.
The people segment. Meanwhile in Oak Park, brought to you by Tridentine Brewing. This first one, there's only two. The second one's super short. This first one, I feel like it was written for hot water history. Excommunicated Oak Park Church continues with services.
Yes. Yes. Thank the Lord.
Quote, excommunication is a medicinal penalty in the Catholic Church.
Ugh. What's with your screen? I see Alain Deneau.
Oh, you can't see it?
There it is. Okay, it just went away.
It was stiflingly warm Sunday at Our Lady Immaculate Church, despite open windows that allowed in little but the sounds of traffic outside of 410 Washington Boulevard. The thing you first notice is the piety of the congregants. Virtually every female wears a short veil, while the males are dressed in a minimum of slacks, dress shirt, and shine shoes. Some wear suits, which would appear to add to the discomfort, though no one seems to mind. But there's something else. While there are at least 200 congregants this morning, with pews full in the lower sanctuary and most of the choir loft, they are primarily younger couples with families. This might be unexpected for what appears to be a pre-Vatican II Catholic service. Older folks may be more apt to reminisce about the full Latin Mass. But this
But
isn't
the mass is at lowercase too.
but this isn't technically a Catholic service.
Oh, it isn't. That's interesting. What would it be then, dear reporter? What exactly is it? Buddhist? What is it?
Earlier this month, the Society of St. Pius X, of which Our Lady Immaculate is a member, was excommunicated by the Vatican.
This is so poorly written. It's not as if the church community is a member of the Society of St. Pius X. The Society of St. Pius X owns and runs Our Lady Immaculate.
Right. They don't know.
They have no idea how to phrase these things.
That was the subject of Reverend Kenneth Novak's homily, a charismatic speaker who minces few words.
Oh, charismatic speaker, huh?
Quote, truth is like a lion let loose.
Aha.
Novak
Who said that?
Novak said at one point during an explanation of why
Well,
the
Novak
society,
said it, but who is he quoting?
Augustine?
Yep, very
Oh,
good.
let's go. Yeah.
Hmm.
Novak said at one point during an explanation of why the Society of St. Pius X is in fact not in schism with Rome and instead is adhering to true Catholic tradition.
Yes.
Quote, it defends itself.
Yes.
Defense seems to be the order of the day for the society.
I don't think so. More like offense.
According to the Vatican News Service, the group committed, quote, an act of schismatic nature through the, quote, episcopal consecration of 4 presbyters without pontifical mandate and against the will of the Supreme Pontiff, Pope Leo XIV.
Oh, wait. Is it? Are they talking about the Chinese CCP elevated bishops? Oh no, they're talking about the same Society of St. Pius X, right?
The decree was made July 2nd, a day after the society consecrated the 4 new bishops in Switzerland. According to the society's website, the decree of schism, quote, is hasty and reveals a flawed understanding of schism. Quote, the Society of St. Pius X and its superior general have always affirmed that they recognize Leo XIV as their head.
And thus we've arrived at the problem with the society. But continue. Why continue on with this charade?
They address him as a subject. They address him as a subject addresses his superior, and as a son addresses his father. They are prepared to obey him whenever the order is accordance with faith or morals.
Okay.
Quote, more profoundly, the society has never claimed to constitute a parallel or autonomous church. It exercises its apostolate as a work of the Catholic Church in its service and its propagation. Wednesday Journal request for commentary from society headquarters in Kansas did not receive a response, but the Archdiocese of Chicago proffered its own statement.
Oh, okay. Yes, because we need the Supich take on what it means to be Catholic, right?
According to that statement, Our Lady Immaculate has never been an archdiocesan church.
How could it be?
As for what excommunication actually means, there is no room for ambiguity. Quote, excommunication is a medicinal penalty in the Catholic Church, the statement said. Its purpose is not to cast someone out, but to make clear that a person's relationship with the church has been seriously damaged and to encourage repentance, reconciliation, and a return to full communion.
Yeah, someone hold up a mirror to Quigley, please.
It also noted that the Holy See, quote, has consistently sought dialogue and reconciliation
No, they haven't.
with the society.
What fucking bullshit is that?
And that the Vatican, quote, has outlined a path for priests and lay faithful associated with the SSPX who wish to return to full communion with the church.
Yeah.
That process includes making a profession of the Catholic faith, affirming communion with the Pope and the church, and working with the local bishop or the Holy See, depending on the individual circumstances.
Yes, but not the mandate against modernism. You don't have to take that. You don't have to profess that. The anti-modernist mandatum. Nope. In fact, to be in communion with the imposter counterfeit church, you have to take the pro-modernism creed. So that's the type of inversion we're looking at here.
Reverend Carl Morello, pastor of Oak Park's 3 Catholic parishes, said he has, quote, mixed feelings about the situation. Mixed feelings Morello, back at it
Mixed,
again.
that's a great nickname. Mixed feelings, Morello. I have mixed
Him,
feelings about Unitarians.
him and
They're
his
part of the
him,
church, aren't they? I got a mixed feeling about it.
him and his slippery slopes. Mixed feelings
Hmm.
Morello, back at
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Wanton killing of children in the womb. Mixed feelings. I don't know how to address this.
He's not been to a service at Our Lady Immaculate.
No shit. To go into for him to go into a mass at Our Lady Immaculate must be the most emasculating thing and traumatic experience to realize how far away he is from being an actual Catholic priest in
Quote,
service of our Lord and in purveying the sacraments.
quote, from what I know, just basically things the cardinal said. The Pope reached out and said, let's make it work.
Oh, yeah.
But they wouldn't stop ordaining, he said.
That's a take. What an idiot. What an idiot. How can you possibly look at yourself in the mirror after putting that in a newspaper, that statement, which is totally ahistorical and inaccurate? Let's make it work. That's what he said. Let's make it work. But they wouldn't stop ordaining. Idiot. They ordained bishops in 1988, and ever since then, with their founder having died, they've begged and begged and begged for official papal permission to elevate priests to the office of bishop. And after Bishop Athanasius Schneider and other bishops have gone and asserted that this is a congregation that is not only in full communion with the church, but is exemplary in its Catholicism. Meanwhile, you have orders and societies like the Jesuits and the Legionnaires of Christ who are rife with sodomists, with pederasts, with absolute sexual deviance criminals. You have rampant corruption in institutions so intimately connected to the church, like the Vatican Bank, uh, orgiastic parties in and around the Vatican with high-ranking prelates. And you're going to come down hard on the one place where, again, as this reporter couldn't help but notice, the true church is operative, where young families are drawn, where true sanctity and the salvation of souls is taking place, rather than their perdition. Morello. I don't have mixed. It's funny. I don't have mixed feelings about Morello.
No, I don't either. To say we're going to do it this way puts them in opposition with the whole Catholic Church.
Oh, really? Oh, well, what about the German synodal path? Right? We're just going to do it this way? Or how about we're just going to do it this way and allow LGBTQ pride parade into the Vatican through the Jubilee doors. Or we're just going to do it this way, our way, which is totally anathema to, I don't know, 2,000 years of church teaching and worship a pagan idol in the Vatican. That we're just going to do it this way. But because it's the official way and we have control of the buildings and we have control of the institutions and we have control of the structures, that's what we're going to do, even though it's totally opposed to what is truly Catholic. I see.
As for the congregation's younger composition, Morello said, quote, a lot of younger couples are leaning toward that.
And you know what they're not leaning to? St. Giles.
They see the
And
they
your
see
15-minute homily that probably touched upon compassion and popsicle stick Jesus building. Or let's build a popsicle stick of the crush scene. That no one's buying that. There's no life in it.
they see the world so out of sync, he said. To go this opposite way seems a sense of security and just being rooted.
Yeah, because they feel there's nothing that makes you feel a sense of security and being rooted as being ostracized into basements and hotel ballrooms because the local bishop is persecuting your preferred ancient liturgy. the one said and observed by countless saints,
Yep.
and it has brought people to salvation. There's nothing better than being rooted, because nothing's cooler in the official church and gets you rooted than defending the use of Latin in the liturgy, or Greek for that matter, or I don't know, not being in favor of gay marriage, or not being in favor of female ordination. Yes, that gets you rooted. Yeah. What an idiot. What an absolute moron.
And so Our Lady Immaculate moves forward with the Society's interpretation of Catholic tradition.
Hmm.
Following the 90-minute service, congregants headed to the church basement where coffee and snacks could be had before an hour-long catechism where at least 100 listened to Novak speak about the classes of grace and their effects.
Go to a Novus Ordo parish and see how many people stick around for a post-mass sermon or instruction and catechesis on the various classes of grace and the gifts of the Holy Spirit that flow from them. Good luck. Once that coffee runs out, they're out. At least in your ordinary Novus Ordo. Now, if you got a traditional Novus Ordo, you're going to see some of that.
In the closed space, Novak, dressed in the typical priest hassock and collar,
Hassock. It's a hassock, not hassock. What?
let his voice boom, enthusiastic and authoritative about his topic and how it relates to recent events involving the Society and the Vatican. At one point, he noted that the church received multiple requests from Oak Park newspapers seeking comment, presumably one of which was the Wednesday Journal. After catechism, a reporter approached Novak, who noted that he didn't look familiar. When asked for comment, he demurred, just like three male congregants, but referred a reporter to Society of St. Pius headquarters in Kansas. But as the conversation wrapped, he was congenial when told the objective is always to write a balanced story, and even shook a reporter's hand with a smile. "You're a true journalist," he said.
Who doesn't know what a cassock is and spells it hassock? Yeah, you're a true reporter, which means you're a functional illiterate.
So I figured you'd have a lot to say about that one.
Yeah, I wish Father Novak would have recognized a non-congregant and reporter who knows nothing about church, in this Greg Voss. You can pure giveaway that he's from Oak Park because he spells Greg with three G's. But he would have done what I believe, who was it? Lou Rockwell did this to a New York Times journalist who had infiltrated Mises University or Mises Institute event in Auburn. And he went up to him and said, Get out," kicked him right out. We're not going to get any fair coverage from you. You're just an agent of the enemy. So get out. You're not welcomed here. Yeah. So freedom of association.
Happy story here. Letter to the editor.
Oh.
They were all talking about these single home zoning things that are going on in River Forest. So it was kind of
okay.
It's kind of boring. Surrender Nand, letter to the editor. Thanks for your help. I would like to thank the two ladies and two gentlemen and the paramedics who helped me when I tripped and fell on the sidewalk outside Chase Bank on Wednesday, June 24th. I was bleeding profusely and had sustained many injuries on my hand, shoulder, knee, and ribs. Because of their thoughtfulness and quick action, I received immediate medical care. Thanks again.
And thanks be to God, they did not take me to West
Oh, come
Suburban.
on.
They did not take me to West Suburban Hospital. There's no one there. No one there. Not a doctor, not a nurse. My hand, my shoulder, my ribs.
That's the people segment.
Yes, it was.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
What would have happened if I'd gone for it and just said, "No, I'm gay"?
Yes, it was. My hand. They take me to West Suburban Ghost Town. No pay the bills.
I want to take a walk around what West Suburban's like.
Oh, that's got to be frighteningly void. Just yeah, ugh.
You probably see some stuff you're not. You probably see some stuff
They
you're
should
not supposed to
sell. They
see.
should allow whoever owns the property. They should allow film crews to go in there and do a horror movie or something like that. What a setting! An abandoned hospital. Yikes! It's like an abandoned mental institution, which is just a small one in the larger mental institution that is Greater Oak Park.
Right.
Yeah.
What else you got?
Oh, let's see. Today's the feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. I was reminded by a post that the final instruction before the miracle of the sun at Fatima was given on the feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel to the children. So that was intentional by Our Lady. And I talk to you about how I ran across that quote about Padre Pio? I don't think I shared it with the audience
I
or on
think
the
you.
podcast
Yeah.
about when you say the rosary, it's like holding Mary's hand. Now I say the rosary, I just that is really my focus. Both her presence and comfort, also the demands, the holy demand she places on me that I be truly devoted to her son in worship and praise, thanksgiving, supplication, sufferance, whatever it might be, come what may. And I can do that and have strength through the graces of faith, hope, and love that she was such an exemplar of and were so resplendent and perfect in her life. So if she can help me along the way and hold my hand, then I can get that done.
Amen.
Yeah. So Our Lady of Mount Carmel, pray for
Pray
us.
for us.
And until then, that is next time. Peace.
Bye, everyone. God bless.